sort of like a vague concept at first if you don't really get what it's trying to be applied to. And so for that, I'm just going to go through a super brief history of bookkeeping. So 10,000 BCE, probably earlier, bartering. People used to trade shellfish for blobs. Bartering, though, has some problems. Obviously, there's granularity issues, like smallest possible unit. So if someone has a cow and they want to trade it for something that's worth less than a cow, they're going to have some difficulties with that. And also with the example of the cow, it's a little bit inconvenient. Then about 1000 BCE, we get our first early currencies. They're an abstract store of value, and they're small, they're portable, they're convenient. They have a lot of advantages over larger systems. Then we get into about 300 BCE, and we get early banking, which is stuff like loans, basic documentation, just keeping track of who has what without physically assigning those assets to everyone. And this is where a lot of really exciting stuff started happening. About 1700 CE, so a lot of time passes, we have the inception of modern banking, credit, business loans, fractional reserve banking, minting new currency that way. Internet-based banking, obviously a bit newer than 1700 CE for that one, and standardized cross-bank ledgers. So problems with modern banking. Modern banking is pretty robust, pretty secure, it works really well. We use it every single day. But it requires a lot of trust, and there can be potentially high or unfair fees, like sending money overseas is one of the most prohibitively expensive things you can imagine. And you really just don't have full control over your own money, which with basic currencies, as soon as we got into banking, it involves trusting someone, and that's where some of the cracks start to show. So the newest innovation in ledger banking, bookkeeping technology is blockchain. And a blockchain is really just a distributed ledger stored on a peer-to-peer network of computers. So what does that really mean? So a distributed system, we've got centralized systems, things like Visa or First Bank or Bank of America, or really the US Mint. You've just got this central hub that does everything. Everyone's connected to it. And if that central hub goes away, everyone's out of luck. Then we have decentralized systems, where you don't have one central hub for everything, but you do still have some things you depend on. So for example, this node depends on that node, and so forth. But then we can move on to the internet and modern systems that allow these things to be possible. We've got distributed systems. And distributed systems is what makes blockchain possible. It's what makes it makes a lot of things possible. So distribution has a few advantages. One of them is increased availability. Cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin never have downtime because every single node on the network is capable of running that whole network all by themselves. It's very hard to censor. For example, China at the moment is trying and failing to ban certain blockchain-based applications. And if you know anything about China, they're quite good at censoring the internet, but they're struggling with this one. There's no middleman, which can lead to reduced fees. So the chain part and the block part consists of this second bullet point, which is a growing list or a chain of time-stamped and chronologically ordered records known as blocks. And a lot of things can be done with these. You can store transaction records like Bitcoin and a lot of cryptocurrencies do. You can track digital assets. You can run a prediction market with things that have been built on Ethereum. You can have proof of their betting. Or you can build a fully autonomous notary of public records with business licenses, trademarks, copyrights that never goes down, has low fees. Here's there's a fly. It's efficient. And so really, the sky's kind of the limit. Dubai recently announced an official government-sanctioned cryptocurrency called Mcash. And projects like Filecoin allow users to buy and sell storage space in an atmosphere of near-perfect competition, which is sort of an economist's dream, but it's never been realized in the real world. And this allows for extremely low prices. So this last part is public key cryptography at hash functions. network to secure the network, which enforces immutability, the property of a blockchain, which ensures nothing can ever change, and validation, which means that every transaction or record on a blockchain is set in stone, works out. And so the life cycle of a transaction, for example, Bitcoin. On our example blockchain, we could have a distributed ledger, which is that thing, that amorphous blob to the right, that could state that Alice has 10 coins and Bob has 3 coins. And those are some graphics I lifted from 1990s paper on public key cryptography. They're named Alice and Bob because that's the industry standard for any cryptography example, and I'm not going to stray from that. So, first step, Alice broadcasts her transaction to the network. She says, I, Alice, am sending 4 coins to Bob. And then the distributed network verifies her transaction's validity. It runs checks and makes sure she has the appropriate balance, it makes sure her signature is valid, which ensures that Alice actually sent that transaction, and it just makes sure everything checks out. And then Bob, as a member of this distributed network, is now aware of his pending increased balance. Since every single member of the distributed network, you see they're all connected, they're all equal, no one member of the network has more power than another, which is what lets these things be possible, what lets them be independent and always-on. And so Bob is now aware of this. And then the distributed network finalizes the transaction by including it in something called a block. And as we talked about earlier, those are included in the chain, which makes up the blockchain, which is the namesake of this entire talk. And Bob now sees that the transaction has gone through and that Bob's balance is now 7 coins. So verifying the transaction actually came from Alice is done through something called a digital signature, which is part of a larger branch of technology called public key cryptography. And so, like, who here has an iPhone, for example? Yeah, a fair amount of it. If you ever use iMessage, which are the blue bubbles, every single thing you send over that utilizes public key cryptography. Apple can't see what you sent, and no one but your recipient can. And so the technology can really be invisible and convenient, and powers a lot of modern conveniences, such as iMessage. And there are Android alternatives, which I use. And so this digital signature, and which is part of public key cryptography, consists of a public key, which is used to encrypt and verify messages, and a private key, which is used to decrypt and sign messages. And so how this works is a public key, hence its name, is public, and it's broadcast to an entire network or a public server, and everyone knows your public key. But you keep your private key secret because it lets you verify who you are and encrypt data. So how does a digital signature work? So we've got Alice here, and Alice, who's talking to the blockchain on the phone, has her transaction in which she sends 4 coins to Bob. She's got her unique timestamp, and this transaction is unsigned. And then using her private key and a signing algorithm, she combines that with her transaction, which includes the information that Alice sends 4 coins to Bob, and then she has a unique timestamp, and then it's still unsigned because she hasn't combined it yet. But then after that, it results in a signed transaction. And we have some binary data, which is just the representation of her digital signature. Obviously, this is just arbitrary binary data, and it's quite a bit bigger in practice. But now that it's signed by Alice, as long as someone hasn't compromised Alice's private key, it's 100% set in stone, 100% verifiable. This slide is awful. That this transaction actually did compromise Alice. So, going back to the life cycle of the transaction, we have the distributed network that finalizes the transaction by including it in the form. And this transaction has already been signed. The fact that it's propagated around the network at all means that individual nodes accept that Alice has the appropriate balance. And how do we do that? Well, we need something called a cryptographic hash. And really the 2 big keystone pillars of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, which is public key cryptography, which you guys already understand, and then a cryptographic hash, which is, it's a unique piece of data that represents the data of a file in a compact form. and it's used every single day for file validation and all kinds of other purposes. Whenever you download a file, your browser performs a check using a hash function to make sure the data wasn't corrupted during transport. So for example, if we have a big file, let's say it's 20 gigabytes, its hash could just be that string of text, which is a number. And then we could have a nearly identical big file, but it has a wildly different hash, which is a very special and important property of a hash function. And then we could have a tiny file, and it would have, its hash would be the same size as these 20 gigabyte very large files. So going back to this, the structure of a blockchain is really just this. It's transaction data, and then a hash of the block. And then the next chain has the previous block's hash, which connects it to the previous block. And then the next block after that has the previous. And so since the hash is fully representational of the block's information and proves that it hasn't been modified in any way, every single subsequent block in the chain further increases the security of the network. So just to recap, we have a transaction which is created, and then the transaction is signed, and then the transaction is pushed to the network, and then the network validates the signature, and then if the transaction is valid, it gets included in a block, and this just gets repeated. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Okay, so there's Alice's signature, and it comes out as this like hash number, right? Is it a hash number?
Well, a hash is included in her signature.
Okay, so is her signature always the same, or is it a different signature hash for every transaction?
That's a very good question, and I believe I get into it.
Okay, well, don't worry about that. Just say I'll answer that later.
No, I got it right. So one of the properties of a signature is it combines unique data, and it generates a signature that is only valid for that data.
Okay.
So for example, when you send an email using a software called PGP, which is Gmail uses a derivative of it now, you include a signature that is only valid for that message. So if someone sees your signature and lifts it, they cannot reuse it.
Okay.
So to answer your question, yes, it's different every time, and the hash of the transaction is factored into Alice's signature.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think we were
shortly, but can we smoke the hash?
What?
Can we smoke the hash?
No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's a different, wrong kind. But it is Boulder.
Yeah.
No, it's always a on computer.
When you talked about the blocks being appended and getting more secure over time, is it actually taking those hash numbers or codes and creating a longer and longer chain, or does it just keep like the last several so that it can track backwards? I don't know if that matters.
It does. So the block group, it includes a reference to only the previous.
Got it.
And so when you traverse through the chain, you're able to create a continuous chain. And in the event of like a fork, which I think you're referencing to, where you have two separate things where multiple blocks reference the same, the network simply chooses whatever chain is longest to the size. And I think I'm going to try to save questions for the end so we can answer them all at once and as I can. But thank you for your question. So, getting to your point, which what involves mining, who gets to make these blocks? Because the block has the ultimate authority on what transactions are valid, what transactions are not. And the answer to that is it depends. For example, Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are some of the biggest names, they use a process called mining, which implements an algorithm called proof of work. We have newer technologies like Lisk and BitShares, which use something called delegated proof of stake. And then we have Ethereum. In the future, we'll switch to a proof of stake system as well. So the proof of work is kind of getting phased out for a few reasons. And so the flow of a proof of work process goes basically like this. I, as a computer, will watch for transactions, and then I'll gather the transactions into a block, which is invalid at this state in time. And then I'll find a magic number called a knots, but when placed inside the block, causes its hash, which is just a number, to be below a certain value. So a few slides back, I talked about how just a tiny change in a file's composition with a 20 gigabyte file that's almost identical produces a drastically different hash. And that's an intentional feature in a lot of hash functions. It's called a cascading effect. And this is what makes mining possible through proof of work. And so when you get your magic number to produce a hash below a certain value, it broadcasts it to the network, and then you collect a miner's reward if it is accepted by them. And so basically, we'll have our block data, which is all of our transactions and all the signatures, and then we'll literally just add 1 to it, and it'll have a hash. And then we'll have all of our block data, and then we'll try it 2, and then we'll have a hash. And then block data plus 3. And this one, just by pure coincidence, it's impossible to predict this without actually computing the hash, has 4 leading zeros, which is representative of it's a pretty small number. And so since that's below the arbitrarily set threshold, it's accepted and it's the winner, and it gets a block reward when broadcast to the network. Some of the disadvantages of a proof of work system is that it's very energy intensive. It consumes a lot of electricity. It's not eco-friendly at all. I think according to some latest statistic, Ethereum and Bitcoin burn about $1 million of electricity every 3 days, which is just insane. However, it's very adaptable. Mining difficulty can be adjusted on the fly to adapt to network conditions, and it's quite secure. Then we have proof of stake, which is a similar thing, but you watch for transactions, you gather transactions into a block, just like mining. But then you enter a lottery system with your win chance based on your total amount of coins held, which is your stake. And then if you win, you sign a broadcast the transaction to the network, and then you collect a reward. It's a lot more eco-friendly, but it does pose a wealth distribution problem in that the rich will always get richer as a result of them having a stake and being able to participate more freely in the staking process. So our final consensus method, these are all consensus methods, is the delegated proof of stake, which is just watch the transactions, gather transactions into a block, and then when it's your turn, create and sign a block, and then broadcast the block to the network and collect a reward if accepted by the network. It's really a very straightforward process that saves a ton of electricity and a ton of complexity. So for how this works, members of the community vote for delegates with their vote weight defined by the total amount of coins. And then the top delegates take turns forging or creating blocks. And so it incentivizes innovation from the delegates. So instead of just purchasing a ton of currency for themselves and using that as they would in a proof of stake system, they can create innovations or contribute to the community or do something charitable and then earn votes from the people who do own lots of coins that vote for these delegates. Another advantage is it's extremely predictable, which depending on the context can be an advantage and a disadvantage, but 99% of the time it's a pretty big advantage. And it's harder to attack because with proof of work and proof of stake, you can either purchase a massive amount of computing power or a massive amount of currency and perform a fairly effective attack on the network. But with delegated proof of stake, that attack surface is much smaller. So just to summarize, a blockchain is nothing but a distributed public database. It's highly available, it has very high integrity due to its digital signatures and hashes. It utilizes public key cryptography, and the blocks are linked by hashes, and utilizes one of many consensus systems. Some examples are mining proof of work, proof of stake, or delegated proof of stake, and much more. I think we barely, just like as a community, barely scratched the surface of some of the applications of blockchain technology. In the future, things such as programmable money and dynamic contracts, which are already being done, distributed applications, truly perfectly competitive markets, which I don't think we've ever seen before, and fully decentralized organizations that can vote on things and allocate funds according to a provably fair, 100% transparent ecosystem. And that's it. It's a fairly straightforward technology, but I think it's really exciting, and I think it has a bright future. So if there's any questions. Thank you. Did you have one?
Yeah. I've heard blockchain described as, like right now we use like a dual system accounting system or dual ledger, and that adding the blockchain is a 3-ledger system.
Yeah, you went from double entry to triple entry accounting.
Right,
That's
exactly.
it.
So can you explain that? Can you explain triple entry accounting?
I can. So you have the two initial entries, just like a traditional counting system, and the third entry is the blockchain as witness.
So the blockchain is the witness, it's the.
And that's the third entry. It's permanent and it can't be undone. People in accounting will argue that it doesn't necessarily communicate that way, but it does kind of make sense that the third witness is the third entry in the
Right.
blockchain.
Okay, cool. Thank
And
you.
one of the advantages of that, as he said, is just the transparency and the public accessibility. And I think more transparency is always good.
You said that the more blocks that get added to the blockchain, the more secure it becomes. How is that?
So, with Bitcoin, for example, if you put your coins into, for example, an exchange where you can buy and sell, usually the exchange will require 6 of something called a confirmation, which is the total number of blocks included. And the reason for this is, in Bitcoin and all proof-of-work systems, there's something called a 51% attack, which is if a single entity controls more than 51% or more than 50% of the total computing power on the network, the likelihood that they'll be able to forge or make a fake transaction propagate and be accepted goes through the roof. And so the reason additional blocks secure the previous is because of my answer to this question with the longest chain solution. So if I, as a rogue entity, wanted to forge, let's say, a transaction, I would make a fake block, my massive processing power I have as a rogue entity, and I would include my invalid transaction. And in order to get it accepted, I would have to then dominate the network and produce the next 6 blocks after that, winning 6 times in a row. And the likelihood of that is astronomically low. So since the longest proof-of-work chain is accepted, in order to forge a transaction, you have to single-handedly outperform the rest of the network, if that makes sense. And so since every single block has a reference to the previous, it further validates it since more work is done for that block. I hope I explained it.
So the more nodes there are in the network, the better for the.
Yeah, that's true as well. But when it comes to just active miners, the more of those, the better as well.
I have a question about the mining. There's right now they're using a lot of ASIC miners, and the new trend is to, for at least proof of work, is to do GPU mining and look for that sort of solution. I was wondering what the difference is GPU mining and ASIC mining.
So, as a former miner myself, Bitcoin, for example, and Ethereum uses a different algorithm. But Bitcoin uses a hashing algorithm called SHA-256, which is a 256-bit hash. It looks a lot like the ones that I put in my presentation, but it's quite a bit longer and quite a bit slower to compute. And when Bitcoin first came out, all it hashes is it's just math. And so you can do that on any processor, but it's kind of slow. And that worked for a while. And then people realized they could take their graphics card. And graphics cards, if the structure of them, they have thousands of parallel cores, which CPU is not. And each core can do a hash function, and it's actually at way higher speeds than CPU. But then moving on to ASICs, as you mentioned, an ASIC is even faster than GPU, because the GPU is still a general computer. It can do anything. And so as a result of that, it loses speed if it just needs to do one specific thing. More specialization always results in more speed. And so an ASIC, all it is it's a chip that's facilitated from scratch to do nothing but the SHA-256 hash function. And since it's literally a special silicon chip that does nothing but that one thing, it does it very, very, very quickly. And that's why they absolutely dominate most mining settings that ASICs are present. And I think this will be the last one, then we're going to hold questions for maybe the panel at the end. We've got. Oh, sorry.
So just going back to the transparency, how do you see coins like Monero affecting transparency going forward with them, increasing demand in that kind of anti-transparency?
Well, Monero is a very special case. It's designed for lack of transparency. It's designed to obfuscate data. People have called it the Tor of cryptocurrency. I think it's really valuable for very special cases. But in general, I think the value of blockchain comes from its transparency. And obviously, you're always going to have use cases where you don't want that. But in general, I think Monero is not an example of the blockchain dream of fully transparent decentralized systems. But it's still got it. Monero's super neat. And
People still need somewhere to hide their stolen funds.
yeah. So I think up next we're going to have Matt talk a little bit about financial applications. All right. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Well, it's going to take me a second to get set up, y'all, so if you want to grab a drink or some food or something.
Yeah,
I'll really
nice.
take a minute.
Hey, man.
It's okay.
Who the hell is this?
512 is a
I mean, it's a college, like, so it's like,
Louis is 512. So,
I'm a social entrepreneur. I like to invest in things not just based on the amount of returns I may receive from it. I like to also look at the merit it creates, the social and environmental impacts of businesses, things like that. I got started in learning about cryptocurrency in about 2012, late 2012, 2013. Since then, I've mined and helped mine Bitcoin to Dogecoin, from Vercoin to Redcoin, a few coins in between, like Peercoin, Primecoin, a couple others. So I'm pretty well versed in various cryptocurrencies and in the space. And around late 2012, I believe, I started hanging out with a lot of libertarians, things like that, at the University of New Orleans. And at the time, they told me about, the Federal Reserve, fractional reserve banking, various things like that. And of course, at the time, I never heard about these things. I didn't even realize that there could be problems with currency. Or, they were like, oh, well, the US dollar's broken, the Federal Reserve is corrupt, all these things. Well, I asked them, okay, well, what's your solution to this? And does anyone want to guess what they told me? No, they didn't. They told me to vote for a guy named Ron Paul. Yes. They were sure that one was going to do, and I was with them on that. Well, as we know, that failed, and that did not work out very well to change the status quo. So I decided to do my own research. I decided to go, well, you know what? I don't like people that come to me with problems and don't have any solutions. So I started doing research, and it was kind of serendipitous that I came across Bitcoin. I was like, oh my God, there's a solution to my problem, and it actually exists online. Like, this is amazing. And at that point, I thought to myself, either I get involved with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and hear about other people talking about it for the next 5-10 years, or I get involved with it myself personally, really inundate myself with it, and grow with it. And I did. And now, here we are talking about it still years later. So, this right here is gold, and we're going to be talking about the value of currency. Because the main and first use case of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was, of course, the namesake currency, cryptocurrency. So when you look at gold, a lot of people usually think value, right? If you saw a gold bar just sitting on the ground, you'd probably pick it up. You'd probably go, look, gold bar, it's not. And that's probably because we all equate gold with value for various reasons. Well, this is a meme. This is pretty much the opposite of cryptocurrency. It's the opposite of currency or what you want in a currency. So this is, if you're not familiar with it, it was a very popular meme from 2012. And it's pretty much just replicated as much as you want. You probably couldn't tell me if this was the original Doge meme or if it was a replication or which replication it was. There's millions of copies of it. They all are identical in a way. And so this really has most of the properties you would never want in a currency. It doesn't give you any intrinsic value. It might make one person laugh, but it might make someone else cry. So you're really not sure. Well, when you combine gold and a meme, you get Dogecoin. So I'm not sure if y'all are aware of Dogecoin, but Dogecoin is known as a joke. It's a joke cryptocurrency. It was made, even the maker of it calls himself an internet troll. Okay? That's the person who made this. Well, the real thing is, this meme, this joke of a coin, well, the prices have fluctuated a little bit, but just 2 months ago, this joke of a coin was worth $200 million in total market cap. And it's kind of at this point that you really need to start thinking to yourself, well, if the joke of something, literally something that's supposed to be the worst of its kind, is worth $200 million, well, then maybe there's something here in this space. Maybe there's something more to it. Well, there is a lot more to it. And of course, this is classic traits of money. It's expanded a little bit. The very first four, divisibility. Can your money be divided? Is it easy to divide it? Portability. Can you transfer it? Durability. Is it durable and will it last? Will it break down? Will it disintegrate in your vault over time, or will it be good? And of course, intrinsic value. Is there some benefit to your currency or good beyond just it being worth something? Can you take it if it was worth nothing and still use it? Well, these four were actually the first four traits of money created by Aristotle. Back then, you didn't quite need as many concepts, you didn't need quite as many things, but as time went on, you started to need more properties of good, sound money. That's when you get fungibility in. Is it interchangeable? One chicken may not be worth one chicken. My chicken is 15 pounds, your chicken is 10 pounds, my chicken is better, right? So you want to make sure that when you change something, $1 is worth $1. One Bitcoin is worth one Bitcoin. It also needs to be secure. Can you counterfeit it? In the day of Aristotle, there wasn't very much counterfeiting going on. Gold was kind of a thing, but it didn't really happen very often. But these days, that's a big thing. Counterfeit protection, your identity getting stolen, like all kinds of things. And of course, is it easily transacted?
It's done that once before, but the TV stays on all the time, so.
The
Well,
cord is
if
right
we need
below
to,
your
this will
foot.
be our
It's talking.
backup. Perfect.
Maybe you're bumping the cord like right behind your back.
Yeah, but that is totally what it is, guys. Somebody's humping the cord.
So,
Excellent. All right, and so you also need to make sure it's easily transacted. Can you easily spend this currency for something else? Some ancient civilizations used to have giant 50-pound stone tablets and circles as currency. Try bringing that to the corner store to go get some milk, right? Not very easy. And of course, scarcity. This is a big one that kind of came up, and it's the fact that a lot of people like to plan for the future. And so even with something like valuable metals like gold and silver, you don't know what's going to happen when all of a sudden a giant find comes up. Some new technology is invented, and now they can dig up new resource patches. And so the problem with even raw resources is even their scarcity is kind of limited. You never know when there's going to be new amounts found. And of course, you need to make sure that it's sovereign. These three at the bottom are the new ones that have been created just in the last 10 years or so. You don't really want to ask someone permission to use your currency. Is it decentralized? As Jackson talked about earlier, decentralization is if one entity goes down, will all of your currency be destroyed? And of course, the new one is smart. Can your money change? How easy is it for your money to change? So we're going to look at a couple of the most popular forms of currency over time really quick and kind of compare them. So gold is obviously not very divisible. You have a gold coin. Well, now you need to cut your gold coin in half. How are you going to do that to break it down? Is it portable? Gold's moderately portable. You can carry a fairly decent bit of value of gold, but if it's too much, you're going to be carrying pounds, if not tons of it. Is it durable? Highly durable. It's a mineral. It'll sit around for, I think the half-life of gold is 2 billion years, so it'll stick around for a while. Intrinsic value? Even if no one wanted gold, people have been using it for jewelry. You can even melt it down, use it in circuitry. iPhones, for example, have a lot of gold in them compared to a lot of electronics. And of course, is it fungible? Is it interchangeable? Or interchangeable? Well, a gold statue, regardless of its form, you melt it down, you check the weight, and that amount of gold is equivalent to the same amount of gold. It's based on weight. And of course, security. Is it counterfeit, or is there counterfeit protection? Kind of. As we all know, most likely you're not going to go home and try and forge some gold to pass it off to somebody. But you could. Some people do actively go and plate nickel in gold, things like that, to try and fraud people. And of course, is it easily transacted? No. If you brought gold coins to the store, no one's probably going to accept it. And of course, scarcity. It's moderate. As I was talking about raw resources, you really don't know what's going to happen with raw resources. 30 years ago, they found a new diamond mine, and it kind of shook up the value of diamonds. The same happened for silver, gold, oil, happens all the time. And of course, is it sovereign? It's not really sovereign. Most of the gold in the world has actually been found. It's actually in vaults, in places. So if you want access to it, you really don't have much of an option. You have to find somebody to be able to use the gold. And of course, decentralized. It's highly centralized. You have places like Fort Knox that supposedly have the most gold of any of the places around. So there's only a few entities that even have large amounts of gold within the trillions. And of course, smart. You can't program gold. Gold's a rock. Can't do anything. Well, then you have fiat currency. It gets a bit better at a few of these things. Is it divisible? Moderately. You can't take a dollar and break it into a dollar, but you have change, right? You can get down to the penny, the nickel, the dime, the quarter. So you can kind of break it down. Is it portable? Highly portable. Easily to carry tons of money with you. A briefcase of money, I think, is $1 million of $100 bills can fit in one briefcase. And of course, durability. Money is fairly durable, but it's easy to burn. Some bugs will eat it. They try and make it tamper-proof, but depending on the situation, your money can disappear on you. And of course, intrinsic value is highly low. I'm sure everyone has heard of the famous Zimbabwe dollar, right? The Zimbabwe $1 trillion notes. Well, they had hyperinflation, and literally the only thing their money was worth for anything for was burning it and using it as wallpaper, because that's all it was cloth and paper. And of course, fungibility. Is it interchangeable? It's highly interchangeable. Is it secure? There's a lot of fraud and things that go on with digital fiat currencies. Not as much with fiat currency, but even so, whenever you go to a store, I'm sure you're seeing cashiers and things swipe a marker onto it, because it's a very common thing to still have your money counterfeit. And of course, is it secure? It's fairly, security, easily transacted. It's highly transacted. The US dollar is the most accepted currency on the planet. If you bring US dollars pretty much anywhere in the world, they will accept them from you for stuff. And of course, scarcity. Big one. Low. No one has any idea how much fiat currency is going to exist at any time. And so when it comes to us trying to plan for the future, which is what you're supposed to do in finance, you can't, because you never know what the value of your currency is going to be from this year to the next year to the next year based on what the Federal Reserve decides what the new interest rates or inflation rates are going to be. Of course, is it sovereign? Very low. If the US government has a problem with you, well, guess what? Every bank account you own, frozen. PayPal, done. Anything you have, gone. Can't use it. If you don't have their permission to utilize their system, you're out of luck. Decentralized, highly centralized. If the US government goes down, or any particular government backing their fiat currency, as that is one of the main traits of fiat currencies, it's backed by a government. Government centralized, it goes down, the currency will likely lose value because there's nothing to back it. And of course, is it smart? Well, no. If you actually want to change any laws in America, it's by virtue of our processes of democracy and all that, it takes years. It's supposed to take years. But for our purposes, if you need a quick, sudden change because something comes up in the environment, you're out of luck. And of course, you have the birth of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. As you can see, it's almost like cryptocurrency was created to be the perfect money. It's divisible, highly divisible. You can break it down to the millionth place, I believe. If they need to, they can add more. You can transact the smallest amount of money easily. Is it portable? It's highly portable. You can keep $10 million on your cell phone. You can keep $10 million in your head if you want to remember a password. Is it durable? Highly durable. As long as the network continues to run, as long as the nodes continue to process blocks, it will be around and it will not be destroyed. If we get a case where the internet and all electricity is destroyed, I think your money is going to be the last thing you're concerned with. So for all intents and purposes, it's highly durable. Intrinsic value. Now some people will argue this, but the intrinsic value of most cryptocurrency, besides the fact that it's potentially decentralized, is also that you can send this money usually instantly. Someone in China, if you want to send them money, it may take 10 minutes on the Bitcoin blockchain. Other blockchains, it'll be even faster. And another thing with the intrinsic values, you can also use it since it's a permanent distributed ledger. You can also attach other information to it, like let's say marriage papers or a mortgage or something like that. The ownership of any of these things can be attached to the blockchain. And of course, that is highly intrinsic. And even if it wasn't worth anything, you could still be able to perform those functions. Fungibility is interchangeable. One Bitcoin is worth one Bitcoin, one Lisk is worth one Lisk, one Ethereum is worth one Ethereum. They're all the same and interchangeable. Is it secure? Well, it's highly secure. As we talked before, you need a 51% attack to really be able to try and break the network. For you to do that, you need to have the majority of the production power of that chain. And typically, if you have the majority of the production power, why would you destroy your own power, right? If you're making 51% of the rewards of a network, why would you want to get rid of that all of a sudden? You probably wouldn't. And of course, easily transacted. It's very easy to transact cryptocurrency, although it could be argued that you can't go to the store and go to Walmart to be able to transact. But considering cryptocurrency was actually made for the digital age, there are lots of digital companies and online companies that will accept your cryptocurrency.
Steam.
Yes, Steam is one of them. And of course you have scarcity. It's very high. Scarcity was actually programmed into Bitcoin. Other coins choose if they want to be scarce or not. But either way, you can judge how much of that currency there is going to be. There are set inflation rates, set market caps, or coin caps. So it's very easy to decide what the scarcity is going to be. And of course, sovereign. As long as you have access to the internet, you can download from GitHub, which is open source, most codes, most programs that you need to be able to run your own nodes. And so you don't really have to ask permission from anybody. As long as you have internet access, you can go and start utilizing a lot of these chains and these protocols. Of course, decentralized, we discussed that. And my favorite of all of these is smart. This is very important. The reason it's my favorite is because if there's something in this that you don't like, change it. If you don't like it, program a new currency. If you don't like one aspect of it, just change that aspect. Or make something completely different. It's up to you. That's the best part about smart programmable money. Now we have here is the US dollar purchasing power from 1913 to 2014. So essentially $100 worth of purchasing power. Right around here in 1933, we had FDR decide to start, he made it illegal to have gold bullion, gold bars, things like that. They start to collect gold from the US population and citizens. As you can see, drastic effects. Until right around here in 1971, Nixon actually decoupled the US dollar from the gold standard. At this time, if you were a US citizen, you could not transact or trade your dollars for gold, but international banks and companies could. At this point, even those companies could no longer change out US dollars for anything. And as you can see from here, the purchasing power has dwindled. Now, keep in mind, this is an exponentially increasing bar over here. So you dropped an order of magnitude in your purchasing power just in the last 100 years since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. In contrast, this is the total market capitalization of cryptocurrency. It only has not even a 10-year track record. And just recently, as you can see, it's been going up, which is quite the opposite of the US dollar's purchasing power. Now, why is this? Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but a very big reason as to why you can do this is because there's a lot of planning involved. As that giant chart I showed you where everything was green for high, that is why I believe that you are seeing such a big involvement in cryptocurrency, because it is so much better at being a currency than our current methods, including digital fiat, that this is the end result. People see this and they're thinking to themselves, well, why would I want to use this money that actually loses value every year when I can start utilizing money that typically gains value over the long term? Which is, of course, the goal of having the programmable money, putting in set caps on the number of tokens, and setting your inflation rates. These are about as many businesses that I could fit on this one page that have accepted cryptocurrency or still do accept cryptocurrency. These are some more very big companies that actually accept cryptocurrency. This is to show you that it's not nobody that accepts it. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you could have gotten away with saying, okay, well, no one really accepts it. But when you have people like Expedia, Mozilla, PayPal, Reddit, Bloomberg, when you have these large companies that begin to start accepting these cryptocurrencies, that's kind of a sign that this is becoming an actual thing. These companies are willing to hold this money probably has at least some kind of value. So looking forward, this is the account penetration around the world of the amount of adults with an account at a formal financial institution. The IMF says that we have 2 billion individuals on the planet, adults, that are under or unbanked. The reason I say this is because cryptocurrency isn't necessarily a use case for us every day. You're not necessarily supposed to go and get some cryptocurrency, and now you're just going to start transacting in cryptocurrency. You're going to go and buy cigarettes and gas and food with it. It's not the case. But for a lot of these unbanked individuals that just do not have access to banking, it's too expensive or too costly to them, well, these people actually have cell phones. They're just not banked. The majority of the world is actually gaining access to the internet, and several people think that 80% of the world is going to have access to internet within the next 5 to 10 years. So when you think about who's going to be using this, you have to think, well, maybe it's not just the people here where you can just go. I didn't touch it that time.
Yeah.
Where? So you have some people here, you can just go to the corner, there's an ATM. There's probably 3 banks between here and me walking half a mile or a mile. You can get money and access these things at any time. But for all the rest of these places, they may want to put up a server or have some kind of digital transaction that only costs pennies. But they can't because the transactions, they can't use any of them. There's too much money. There's things like even a $1 transaction fee for somebody will price out an entire continent for being able to use it. And so in conclusion, my favorite thing about cryptocurrency is that there's a lot of them. If you don't like one, you go move to another one. If you don't like those, go make your own. But you have to do your own due diligence before getting involved in them. So don't go buy cryptocurrency. Don't just go run off and hope you're going to get 10,000 times gains on your investment, because chances are that boat already sailed. There are people who have gained that much in cryptocurrency, but that's a lot of exuberance. It's a lot of developing really quickly. However, a lot of these different currencies offer various different things that the other ones don't. Some of them, like Bitcoin, try to be scarce. There's only 21 million of them. There's a set inflation rate. It's actually supposed to be deflationary. So in that sense, it's supposed to be worth a lot. Some of these coins, like Dogecoin, print as many as they possibly can so that anyone can use them with a basic miner at any time. Maybe that's not quite the case since they've merged mine with Litecoin, but the point is, you can choose from any of these coins to try and find the use case that's good for you, for your situation, and you should not get involved into it until you've done your due diligence and done research on what it is that you're doing. And of course, special thanks to Lisk, who is our sponsor. Lisk, which our next presentation is going to go into a little bit of detail on, is one particular cryptocurrency that has a lot of opportunity for developers and entrepreneurs all together to try and come together to be able to develop their own cryptocurrencies and their own new solutions. So I leave you with that. If there's any questions?
You talked about the transaction costs of like pricing out entire countries or nations or whatever, and it seems like the transaction cost for using Bitcoin is kind of gone up as more and more transactions.
Yes, it has. That is because they have a block size limit on the amount of data that for transactions that can be fit into a single block. So because of that, if you don't make it on that block, then you don't get your transaction through, which leads to people having higher and higher transaction fees.
Yeah.
So that is a thing that's happening with Bitcoin.
Is there a planned solution for that? And
There's several planned solutions. Because of that, you have a fork into Bitcoin Cash, which has 8 megabyte blocks. You can do up to 32 megabyte blocks. Their goal is to try and make it as quick as a transaction network as Visa with very, very low fees. But since Bitcoin kind of has lost its particular use case for those very low fees, there's multiple other currencies that you could use that have instant and very low fee transactions.
what is the primary use case for Bitcoin these days?
The primary use case for Bitcoin, well, if you wanted to send a lot of money, you can still do that within minutes. It's highly secure, so if you look at all the chains that are of cryptocurrencies, it has the most proof of work and the most computing power behind it. So taking it down and destroying is probably very, very difficult.
Because it's old, we talked about how.
Yes, it is, because it's very old, there's a lot of people involved, and you could probably say that the first mover advantage, I mean, that's always important in any business space, and Bitcoin definitely has that.
I would say Bitcoin's biggest use case now is actually to invest in other cryptocurrencies. It's now used as a vehicle to invest in other cryptocurrencies more than anything.
Yes, it is. It is useful as the first tool people usually get
And so it's
Bitcoin
basically-
before investing in other currencies.
It's like the fundamental economic unit of the cryptocurrency ecosystem.
But to answer your question, there's a reason that there's essentially like a war between all of these splits that are happening in Bitcoin, because so many people actually think the use case of Bitcoin is something different. So that's why you're starting to get this, but that ultimately leads to more coins, more chains, and more options for us.
I tried using Bitcoin Cash once, and it took like 6 hours for 2 confirmations on the network.
Yes, since the Bitcoin Cash fork occurred, the miners are actually kind of in it for profitability, obviously. So since their care isn't as much on the network being sound, and it's on profitability, they have just been switching between the two chains to gain the most profit, and that's been hurting both chains. Some people say that that won't happen for long, because only one of them can survive. But I think that this will definitely not be solved until after SegWit 2X is taken care of, I believe, in November, next month.
What's your opinion on SegWit 2X? Just curious.
And what is it?
So you have the original Bitcoin blockchain, and there's a 1 megabyte block limit that's in it, and some people believe that there should be different use cases for Bitcoin, and that it would be better with the 1 megabyte block limit. So another group decided that they didn't like that. This is oversimplifying. But another group decided that they didn't like that route, so they made a fork. Essentially, they copied the Bitcoin chain, made their own version with a slight change by increasing the protocol, or increasing the megabyte limit. Well, now that original Bitcoin chain added something called SegWit, which is created by some developers to try and solve the scaling problem without increasing the block size. Well, that's part of the current Bitcoin blockchain, and there's another group of people who have got together, and they think that they know the best solution, so they're trying to fork that chain again to make a third chain to attempt to know best of what to do with Bitcoin.
And that's supposed to happen in November.
And that's supposed to happen in November.
So it's not Bitcoin Cash won't split. Bitcoin will split.
Bitcoin will then split again, yes. Yes, it's a lot to keep up with, and it's very exciting though, because no one actually knows what's going to happen.
And so you say SegWit 2X. I mean, what is SegWit? When you say SegWit 2X, does that mean it's SegWit is split?
Yes. So right now, Bitcoin has this new SegWit code. SegWit 2X keeps the SegWit code, but increases the block size by 1 megabyte from 1 to 2.
And will that be with the original Bitcoin or the split?
That will be with the original Bitcoin would split to have the SegWit code and an increase in block size by 1 megabyte.
And then what would the split guy have?
Well, if you knew the answer to that question, you would be very rich in the next month.
Okay.
That is the biggest thing. If anyone actually knew what was going to happen, and some people think they do, they're starting to place bets on it as we speak by buying the coin that they think is going to do.
All right. Thank you.
So you mentioned security, or secure for like the different standards of currency over the years. There's no security when it comes to like identity theft or losing your account. There's no like insurance, right? When it comes to cryptocurrency. If like an app that you download to your phone steals your key or something like that.
Okay, so when we talk about security, it's not user and security.
Right.
So
the ledgers.
Blockchain is actually not that user friendly. In most cases, I mean, some people can't even figure out how to use checks still. Like I know, I know old people that are worrying with that. So it's definitely not easy to use. But as far as security is concerned, is it going to disappear overnight? Is an entity going to come in and be malicious and be able to destroy it? Is this entity or are the miners going to be able to particularly single you out and attack you? Probably not.
But I guess my worry is for the individual. One person losing their key is the end of their.
You should keep
for-
several keys. That'd be like having a
keys.
giant safe and only having one key to it, and then your key's lost.
For someone who's not particularly experienced, it's better for them to use a custodial service like Coinbase or something to hold their funds. If you can't secure your funds correctly, or you don't understand exactly what you need to do that, then you're better off just keeping it in the custody of someone else. Although that's highly unrecommended because the freedom of Bitcoin is being able to control your own money. But right now, that's what a lot of the development is working towards, to simplify and improve the end user
You see
experience.
some altcoins that are a bit easier to use. Like you can, like Lisk, for example, you can have a name with your account. Mine's Ultra Fresh. So I can go and have someone send me funds on that account. You can go and make your own account. You just type your name in so you don't have to use an expansive code. And for the case of Bitcoin, its code is, or its private key and public key, very long. But a lot of altcoins are starting to shorten that code to be very easy for you to use. So there are people working on it, but if you don't know what you're doing, you should be very cautious moving a lot of money through the blockchain.
And there are some cryptocurrencies that also have mechanisms that, for example, implement time as to when a transaction could happen. So, like for example, with Steemit, that is a cryptocurrency platform that's been built more with user features.
All right, everybody. Hello, my name is Edward Trosclair. I'm the mid-U.S. ambassador to the Lisk project. We just escaped the hurricane in Louisiana to come here to see you all. We love Boulder too, so we're really excited to be here. So I have a presentation for you today. It's what is Lisk, history, and what's next. So first of all, what is Lisk? It's a JavaScript blockchain application platform. It's based in JavaScript and Node.js. These are two of the most accessible languages in the entire world, which means that more developers will be able to understand the code of the blockchain than any other. So in January 2016, there was a problem to solve. Entry into the blockchain development field is hard. It's expensive, time-consuming, takes extensive knowledge. So Max Kordek and Oliver Beddoes, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer of Lisk, decided to solve that problem. And so the solution was a development framework for blockchain technology, similar to Rails or Django for traditional programming. So in order to make that dream a reality, they had to collect the funding. So they sold an initial distribution of Lisk. 100 million Lisk were exchanged for 14,000 Bitcoin. This so happened to just be when Bitcoin was only worth $400. So they really won the last wave of cryptocurrency. They held the entire 14,000 Bitcoin until it's worth well over $4,000. So now they have $60 million in funding or more. Project's probably funded as long as you can go. And so after those tokens were sold, they were made live on the network in May of 2016. And since then, the network has been quite busy, and we have over 1,000 nodes, 250,000 transactions, $500,000 in volume, and now actually 52 core releases. So in November, after a period of trying to establish a cryptocurrency nonprofit in Germany, which was unsuccessful, they had to do so in Switzerland. And so the money became available. And that's when they began to start hiring their team. So since then, they've made quick work, and they have hired developers from 12 different countries. And as you can see, there's a lot of beautiful faces here, right? Yes, indeed, Isabella is amazing. We love Isabella. She actually transplanted from the U.S. now to Berlin. She's living a dream. So in June, we had the Lisk Nano release. This is the first major release of Lisk's Lite client. This allows you to perform the basic tasks of the network, such as voting and sending transactions, and also signing messages. Now, Lisk Core, in June, we came to finally Lisk Core 0.9. So we haven't reached a full version, full major release of Lisk yet. That's how early this is for investors and developers to take a look at. We're not even at 1.0, which is actually coming soon. So Lisk is also working with a few companies to really shore up their strategy and their marketing, and so they've teamed up with Relevance. And as far as I know, they've pretty much completed their term with Relevance, and now they are about to unleash it upon us. And also, they are working with Taki Onaten, a creative rebranding company who is responsible for new website, new logo, design, etc. And they're a very talented team that have clients such as Boulder and Microsoft. So the league that Lisk is operating in now is top, and especially in terms of cryptocurrency. So in December of 2017, we'll have the entirety of the Lisk ecosystem, at least in its first basic form. And basically, those blockchain applications I talked about that this platform is for will consist in 3 parts. The blockchain database, which is in PostgreSQL, the smart contracts backend, which is in Node.js, and the user interface front end, which is run with JavaScript and HTML, CSS, etc. So right now we are waiting for the first release of the software development kit, and that's basically the tools for development and deployment of your blockchain apps. Once we have that, developers will really be able to dig in and start creating prototypes, etc. So here's a good comparison as to what the main issue at heart of what Lisk is doing differently than other cryptocurrencies. So Ethereum is, as you can see, as the blockchain goes along, all the financial transactions, smart contracts, and utility and applications are all in one layer. So after a certain point, this becomes kind of fragmented and just a bit cluttered. And ultimately, it just can't scale. Once all these contracts and applications are running in one execution environment, we've already seen congestion on the Ethereum network. So Lisk has proposed a solution called sidechains. Basically, that the blockchain and the financial data will remain on the one main layer, but applications and smart contracts will get their own cryptocurrency and their own sidechain. So basically, this really modularizes the cryptocurrency and gives it a ability to scale outwardly. So this is really the scaling solution blockchain's been looking for. So into the future, Lisk will have the blockchain application platform and also a full ICO suite. This means that you'll be able to launch a token